Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group says the current minimum wage of R27.58 an hour is insufficient to cover basic needs in 2024. It suggests that it should be at least 40 Rand per hour just to break even. Mervyn Abrahams is the group's program director, and he joins us now to explain. Mr. Abrahams, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Look, I think anyone who hears 27 Rand 58 cents already thinks, well, that's so little, but that's the minimum wage that we're sitting with at the moment. So let's start with your reaction in March when that minimum wage was announced.
So good morning, lady, and good morning to all your viewers. So with the announcement of the 8.5% increase in March, which took the national minimum wage to 27 Rand and 53 cents, we welcomed it for one reason, that it was at least a 0.5% higher than the inflation rate as it was trending for people in that economic category at the time, which was around about 8%. So that's a good thing. The national minimum wage needs to be increased higher than inflation so that we can begin to get parity over a period of time. However, since then, we have seen major increases in cost of living. So we've seen major increases, for instance, in the price of electricity. 15% in some municipalities. We have seen massive increases in municipal services, water services, rates, etc. We've seen interest rates remaining high. And all of this is eating away at the ability of households, number one, to feed their families properly, and number two, to create a little bit of a savings cushion, because when inflation hits us again in 2 years' time, then at least people have the ability to survive a cost of living crisis. And that is part of the problem in South Africa. Our wages are too low to help us to survive a cost of living crisis.
And you've put forward the suggestion or proposal that national minimum wage should in fact be at 40 Rand per hour. How have you crunched those numbers?
So what we looked at what households are currently spending. So if you're looking at for instance, a wage of something in the region of 4,600 Rand working for a full month, we know that, for instance, about 36% or like 1,500 of that is spent on transport alone. With the new electricity prepaid services for 350, that now goes to 906 Rand just for electricity. We are told that on average households spend between 450 and 500 just servicing the debt. So whether it is having a store card or whether it is taking a loan from someone, they have to service that debt. And only then do they buy food. So how much is left over? At that stage, we only have something like 1,743 left over. And a basket of food for a household of 4 will cost you something in the region of about just over 3,500 Rand.
Yeah.
So when you put all of that together, you then get to a sum which would calculate to something in the region of about 40 Rand per hour.
Yeah, it's interesting because at the same time you've got, this government of national unity that has come together where you've got the ANC and the Democratic Alliance working together, the DA, for instance, having said, no, we need to do away with the national minimum wage, because what it does is that it shrinks opportunities for those that are looking for employment. What do you say to that argument that as we raise the national minimum wage, we're actually shrinking the pool of work opportunities that are available because the employer simply can't afford it?
No, lady, we need to really relook at, and this is one of the reasons why we put this out, particularly in the light of this possible discussion around dropping the national minimum wage. So we need to see wages are not only money coming into my pocket, or into your pocket. Money comes into our pockets and then gets spent in the economy. So I go to the store and I buy more things, which means that the store now has to employ more people because more people are coming in to purchase various things. So it's a very one-sided view to only look at saying that companies cannot afford the salaries, and therefore we shouldn't have a national minimum wage. In fact, we believe that if there was no minimum wage, now our unemployment situation would have been even worse than it was, because as the wages are being spent, so jobs are being created, and so economic growth and productivity takes place as well.
Okay, so I mean, if we were to project those numbers, because at the moment, what is it, 3.8 million workers who are under the minimum wage, what would those numbers look like in terms of how many people you might be able to project would be in the workforce?
So we do not believe, I mean, you know, when the national minimum wage was first implemented, there was a massive outcry to say that this is going to lead to job losses. There is absolutely no empirical evidence to prove that now, after 4 or 5 years of having the national minimum wage, that even one worker has lost his or her wage, her work because of that. So we have not seen, the unemployment is not associated with the national minimum wage. It is associated with other factors such as load shedding, logistics, our ports not working properly, so we can't export, etc. Therein lies our problem for unemployment. It is not associated with increasing the national minimum wage.
Yeah, we need to talk a little bit about domestic workers here, because what some of them have reported, though, and there was a few of these articles done where some domestic workers have said, well, if my employer pays me more, then she books me less, right? What do you say to employers that say they're buckling?
Yes, so domestic workers is almost another category of workers, because there's a different relationship that exists between a domestic worker and his or her employer. But what the domestic worker situation helps us see, and this is why we use that example, is that when you look at the domestic workers, they are by and large single-headed households, women-led households, in the township. So when you look at the wage packet of the domestic worker, you get a very good insight into the household economy that happens within the township area. And that is why that is important. Even though we know that it might be a struggle for domestic worker employers to be able to pay at 40 Rand per hour in the current economic situation. And so for us, that is aspirational rather than the reality. But if you want to see what the national minimum wage does in the township household, women-led household, then look at the domestic worker wage, and you will get an insight into the level of hunger, into the level of how low the wage really is, and how much the wage is actually perpetuating a situation of poverty. If you take the national minimum wage and you divide it by 4 persons, because each worker has to feed 4 people, then you arrive at a figure like 1,553 Rand. Now, Naledi, that is below the National Treasury's upper bound poverty line. So it's actually a poverty wage.
Sure. And we're doing the mathematics here. So if you're earning 27 Rand 58 cents hourly, that comes to, say you work a 21-day average a month, that comes to about 4,000.
Something like 4,600 or so.
And then at 40 Rand?
At 40 Rand, that would take it then to 800 or just over 900 Rand.
No, a month.
Sorry, 9,000.
Okay.
A month, yes.
Okay, just over 9,000 Rand. That's, I mean, I suppose it's a discussion to be had. Our cabinet continues to sit, of course, as these political parties try to bring their manifestos together and synergize them. What is your message as those decisions are made?
So the first thing is, we cannot do away with the national minimum wage. Even at the rate of 27 Rand per hour, we cannot do away with that. And we need to see wages as a contributory factor to consumer spending, which keeps the economy going. So if we do away with that, we cut our nose to spite our face. So that needs to stay in place. And we need to look at how do we expand employment in the intermediate term because expanding employment will also lead to an increase in wages. So over a period of about, a couple of years, we should aim towards getting at least 40 rand per hour as the national minimum wage.
Okay. And what's the next step for your lobbying?
So really, we're putting this out in there in the hope that the policymakers, in the hope that the politicians will take notice and expand their understanding of actually the impact of the national minimum wage. Before the national minimum wage, there was much greater household poverty. Yeah. At least the poverty has been alleviated. It's not been eradicated. It's been alleviated. Going back will only create deeper levels of poverty, and we really cannot do this. So we are really scared that the national minimum wage not be taken away, and that we continue working towards getting wages at a decent level, and that a wage becomes a living wage, because that's really why workers go to work. Yeah, is to earn the money to pay for the basic necessities of life.
All right. Of course, Mr. Abrahams, I had to just quickly check the mathematics here. So 40 rand per hour as you're proposing, multiplied by an 8-hour day, coming to a 21-day average per month would come to about 6,720. That's in comparison to 4,600 rand at 27 rand 58 cents per hour. But a better number nonetheless. Thank you so much for speaking to us. That was Mr. Mervyn Abrahams from the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, calling for a 40 rand per hour minimum wage.